We are in week 2 of a series that takes us through Easter here at 828 called Graves to Gardens. And last week I just shared a message about how sometimes we have unexpected guests or things happen differently than what we had imagined. And if you caught the podcast or anything like that, you might have picked up on this, but I actually had a little bit of a change of heart of how I wanted it to be titled, because really the message was about putting death to death. Come on, somebody. And that's what Jesus was working on when he came to earth for us, to put an end to the power of death, which really comes from sin. We know that. Sin separates us from God. It is our broken choices that led to this broken world, and that might have started in the Garden of Eden, but it took Jesus to the Garden of Gethsemane to a point of decision. And his willingness to go to the cross for us is critical. And then on this Easter Sunday, we don't just celebrate the crucifixion, come on, but we're here today. Help me out a little bit to celebrate the resurrection. And we need resurrection too. You know what I'm saying? Like the enemy's always trying to put us under. Can I get a good amen on that? Because it's true. He is not happy with us being happy or healthy or whole. But the thing that fascinates me about this whole week of Easter is that it can be busy. Anybody? I'll be honest with you, after last Sunday's service, and it was Sunday afternoon, and I was thinking about all that I had going on this week, which included for me a lot of things not even just associated with this morning. I had a lot going on this week. We had a wedding and several different things that were just happening that are kind of seemed to just land on this week. And I don't know if you do this at all, but I whined about it just a little bit. Like I wasn't, no one was there but me, so I thought, you know what I'm saying? I was sort of verbally processing, but I was like, whew, I'll be glad when this week is over. And I love Easter. Like I felt so convicted after it came out of my mouth. And then I felt like the Lord whispered to me, you can debate how you hear God, but there was a voice, it might have been mine, but whatever the case, I feel like it was prompted by Holy Spirit. And the voice said this, as if it were Jesus speaking, I was busy on Easter week too. I felt a little bad. I was like, that's a salient point. That's a good point. You did have a lot going on, because Jesus on Easter week, come on, he had a date with death. That was on his calendar. And as we said last week, he knew it. Because the prophecy that was fulfilled when he came into Jerusalem, we celebrated Palm Sunday last week, that was a fulfillment of prophecy, and he was intentional about living that out. And he knew that marked the end of his earthly journey. Especially the pre-resurrection. Now, he's going to spend a little more time in his glorified body, but cloaked in humanity, he was about to be finished, and he knew it. And a first takeaway for us to consider this morning, a point that I want you to ponder, is this. Jesus was on his way to die, to put an end to death. And he knew it. John, the beloved disciple, wrote in John 1. And can you imagine, John was written between 85 and 95 AD, after the death of Jesus. So that puts it about 50 years-ish after the life of Jesus, the crucifixion, the burial, the resurrection. It's about 50 years after that he wrote his gospel. And I think he waited on purpose, because there are stories in the book of John that were better written after the characters were already in eternity. He was protecting, he didn't want to have to change the names. He told the story of Lazarus. There's some other things about the book of John that are unique to the other gospels. But he started his book like this. In the beginning was the Word. Now note that just right there. He went all the way back to the book of Genesis right there. Right? They bring this out in the series The Chosen. But he went all the way back. In the beginning. That's the other place that language shows up. In the beginning was the Word. Right there at the point of creation. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. And all things were made by him. And without him was not anything made that was made. And in him was life, right? He came with life in his hand. And that life was the light of men. And when you consider the reality, again, that he wrote this about 50 years after the event, the next line to me takes on even more importance, because then he said, the light shines in darkness. Come on. Think about the tomb for just a quick minute. And the darkness did not overcome it. He's speaking presently in past tense because he saw that darkness could not overcome the light. And then verse 9, he said, the true light which gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to be called the children of God, or to become the children of God, who were born not of the blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the word, I don't know. I like this whole chapter, but I love this verse. Verse 14, and the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. I know this isn't new news, but Jesus knew from the beginning. Understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm taking you back to Genesis 1 right now. He knew from the beginning, from the creative moment, when he and Father and Holy Spirit chose us, he knew from the beginning that this week would come. And he chose it. Man, that says something. Yo, that says something. And now he's here. So here we are in the story this morning. He's here the final week before his death. And as I said earlier, he's got a full week ahead. You know, you learn a lot about someone's priorities. Have you noticed this? You learn a lot about someone's priorities by what they do when they know they're about to be gone. Like when you're about to travel or something, you know you're finna be gone for a minute. Karen, my amazing wife, I've been with for 3.5 decades almost now. When we get ready to travel, and listen, she's a spectacular housekeeper, and we are definitely a team, dudes, don't you think for a second. That woman takes care of the house without me. That was never one of the options, nor was it one I was wanting. So we work together. You know, we're in there doing whatever we're doing. But I'm more of a straightener. I'm going to own that, okay? Like, as long as it looks good, I don't mind hiding some stuff here and there and everything, you know. I sweep the part you walk on and see. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm better at that, honestly, than she is. Like, she gets stuff piled up. She's the dishwasher. It hadn't been ran yet. There's space in there, but she still puts stuff in the sink, and then she'll come back to it later and put it in there. And me, I'm walking through the kitchen. I'm like, oh, I got to put these over here. Right? I'm over here. I'm putting stuff in there. I just want, to get it as it goes. But I don't clean it real good. And then we get ready to go somewhere. And I'm trying to get us in the ride, right? Try to get us to the airport or whatever's going on with that. And she's cleaning. And she's cleaning. You understand what I'm saying? Like, she's really cleaning. The priority of the house hits her heart. She does not want to come back to a dirty house. Every bed's got clean sheets. Every bed's made. Yeah. You probably learned a little bit of her personality and mine too right now if you know temperaments, okay? But I will say this to you about that. When we know we're going to be gone from family, she don't care about the house. She cares about the kids. That's when it shifts. Like when she knows we're going to be gone and we ain't going to get to see these grandbabies for a minute or something like that, she don't care about that house. She cares about those kids. Are y'all following along right now? Like, you can tell a lot about someone's priorities when you see how they act when they know they're about to be gone. And man, we see that in this last week of the life of Christ. Even on his way into Jerusalem. So I'm cheating backwards to about day 8, before the crucifixion or the resurrection, actually. But on his way into Jerusalem, prior to Palm Sunday, he's just coming into town. He's just coming into town. Jesus was never just doing anything. He was always doing something on purpose and intentionally and powerfully impactful. He's coming in and he healed 2 blind men. One was a man named Bartimaeus sitting on the side of the road. Son of David, have mercy on me. Son of David, have mercy on me. Well, I got to be somewhere. Yeah, I got a date with death. But I came to die for you. And then there was a tax collector, reviled by everyone, named Zacchaeus. I wonder how much Matthew loved it when Jesus took time for Zacchaeus. Matthew, the disciple that had been a tax collector. I wonder if he was pointing. Don't miss that guy. Don't miss that guy. He needs you so much. Jesus took time to have lunch with Zacchaeus on his way to town. Had a date with death. Then Palm Sunday happened. That was a lot. Covered that last week. Then the beginning of the next week. My gracious. He had a to-do list. Anybody keep to-do lists? Jesus had a to-do list. Okay, let's see. I need to kick those guys out of that temple. I've been thinking about that for a minute. Probably should have done it already. That's how I would have felt had I been Jesus. I'm going to kick the money changers out of the temple. They're taking advantage of people. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to roll in there. I want to teach these guys a little more about generosity. So Mark tells us a story from that week where he sat outside the temple treasury. He wanted to make sure that they knew it wasn't the person who gave the largest quantity, but the person who most sacrificially gave. So he pointed out a widow who gave 2 copper coins. And then he was teaching and healing constantly. He was sharing parables. He had several deep religious debates with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and that was for them. He was still hunting for someone whose heart would turn, but it was also so we would have a record of those teachings, so we would know and understand some really important principles. He was working. He had a lot. He had a lot to do. I think he was conflicted even as he was coming into town, because I think he hated to leave his followers. You could see that. It was hard for him to talk about. But he knew it was the Father's will and the eternal plan. He had an assignment, essentially, is what I'm trying to say, to destroy death and restore life. Another point I want to make sure we don't miss, though, from this beginning is that Jesus knew from the beginning this week would come. And then let that one be there for just a minute. So I've made that point already. And then I want to jump to the priority Jesus put on people from beginning to end. Says a lot about the love he has for us. I just spent the last 5 to 7 minutes making that point. I think it's important. And then you consider after he's accomplished the majority of those things, and there was a couple left to do. So then there was the Passover that he had planned to have with his disciples. Got to wash them stinky feet. Okay, that's still out there to do. Probably going to have to change the water a few times. Help us, Lord. Probably not. He got those things done. All those things mattered much. But again, the top priority was to rebuke death and to restore life. And to restore life was an important part of it. It wasn't just to destroy death, but it was to restore life. Because when life leaves, when life leaves the human body, there are some telltale signs. And I don't want to get into that too much graphically, but a part of what happens and has happened historically in my life, I know that some of you share this space, but I've been at a lot of people's death moments. And I've said goodbye to some family members and people I loved very much. And, but even as you age, I think about myself. Help us, Lord. I've definitely lost the ability to do a few things, that I could do more. I don't run much. I got to tell you the truth. If I need to get somewhere fast, I prefer to sit behind the steering wheel. Trying to do a little bit better. But there's, but honestly, like for the vast majority of my life, I didn't have to wear glasses. But, I'm getting older. And my lenses are thicker, and so now I'm wearing readers and whatnot. I'm just saying there's some things and in a spiritual sense, the pangs of death, the things that the enemy robs from us, cause us to lose certain abilities. In some cases, we lose the ability to hope because of death, because of what the enemy's trying to kill and to steal and destroy, because that's what he came to do. And we lose the ability to love or even let someone love us well. That happens sometimes when we're spiritually dying. We lose the ability at some point to even be honestly compassionate. So many things that the enemy works to rob from us. I'll use another just physical metaphor in regards to that, but I also have I have 2 vehicles that I drive. Karen has a newer ride. I think hers is a 2019, but mine are 2009 and 2003. And they were pretty cool, new, both of them. Pretty cool rides when they were new. Didn't have the second one new, but the first one, the 03 Silverado, you'll see around here sometimes. It's sort of the church truck at this point. You're like, whose old beat-up black Chevy is that? That's mine. Okay, that's who that belongs to. And that truck, when it was new, it could do, now, it was a beast. Remember that first day I drove into the driveway, Isaac? Now the driver's side door don't open. I got to go through the passenger side and open my door. I fixed the air conditioner last year. It broke again this year. It's like, look, I'm old and I ain't interested. Stop trying to make me blow cold air. I'll get you up and down the road. You need to be happy with that. You put new tires on it and they still go flat. I have no idea. I love that truck, but it's decaying. You know what I'm saying? It's got rust. I got a little rust too. Me and that truck, we're old friends, okay? The death will do that. I kind of want to restore it though, one day. That's how God looks at us. Okay, I'm going to restore that. Well, he did. He already gave us the option, the opportunity to be restored, completely restored. Better. Like some upgrades. If I ever do, Jason, get to restored, I'm going to give it some upgrades. It's going to have about 650 horsepower. They got a chip for it. That 6-liter high output engine is going, it's going to be next level. I saw that when my mom went to be with Jesus too. Mom passed away a couple of years ago. My mom was the most important and impactful person for me spiritually in my life. My dad was a God follower for much of his life. My mom was so faithful to take us to church and teach us about who Jesus was. But over the last several years, when she went to be with Jesus, she was 82, but she spent her life taking care of other people. She was a kindergarten and first grade teacher, and she took care of my dad, who went to be with Jesus years before that from COPD, and she took care of my sister, who was Down syndrome. She took care of her aging parents before they both went to be with Jesus. So she did a lot. And so the last 10 years or so, you could really tell the wear for her. And even some of her thinking was getting just a little bit skewed. She didn't have necessarily dementia. I know some of you have journeyed through that as well. But you could see some of the diminished capacities. But it was amazing that the one thing that never went away was her heart for God, or the way that she expressed her love for him, or communicated his love for her. And it's not a surprise that even when physically we're dying, our spirits can be fully alive. I've seen that lots. I have seen that so often. Even when people in those last moments of physical life were not even capable of communicating it. You could see it. You could sense it. When someone was a God follower, you could feel his presence and feel his power in those moments. And that's not a surprise. Another point to consider is this: Jesus has always been bigger and stronger than death. I won't even touch this story, but I'll just say he was the fourth man in the fire. You know what I'm saying? When Nebuchadnezzar threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in there, he was the fourth man. Like you die. What you do when you get thrown into a fiery furnace is you die. In fact, the Bible tells us in that Old Testament story that the men who threw them into the furnace were killed. It was so hot. But guess who didn't die? Those three dudes. You know why? Because they were standing next to Jesus, because there was a fourth man in the fire. And when you stay close to Jesus, and I'm speaking spiritually here, you don't die. Death can't touch you. I mean, death is all around. I get it. It's still here. But you know what I'm saying? Like, Jesus is too strong for death. And whether he sorts it here or handles it in eternity, the truth is Jesus just doesn't dig death. You know what I'm saying? He don't put up with death. Physically speaking, I've walked with people, as I said a minute ago, and some miraculously healed. We had friends who over the last couple of years were given incredibly devastating prognoses and then were miraculously healed, and many more who were healed on the other side of eternity. He can do it either way. He's a sovereign God who looks into this world and discerns what's best for the person. It's not always what we feel like was best. Come on, if it were up to us, we would say better that they would stay here, right? Stay here with me. I remember after my dad died, I told my sister had recently died, and I told my mom, no more dying for 20 years. And she said, would that it were up to me, but it's not. There was a story about a lady who was dying. Someone came to her. She was an amazing God follower, and they said to her, if it were up to you whether to live or die, which would you choose? If God said, it's up to you whether you live or die. You can be healed here, you can live, you can die. What would you choose? And she said, I think I would leave that up to God. Because he's God. And they said, yeah, I mean, I get that. But if he gave the decision to you, what would you choose? And she said, I think I would leave that decision up to God. I'd be that guy saying, let me live. I ain't even trying to lie to you. I'm not as deep as the lady in the story. But I want to be. And that person frustrated said, yeah, but if he said it's up to you. She said, well, then I think I would choose to refer it back to him again. Because he's God. What I know, though, is that he handles death. And then there's a story, jumping back again for just a quick minute, earlier in Jesus' journey on earth, where this point is made so powerfully. Jesus went with his disciples to the village of Nain, and a large crowd followed him. A funeral procession was coming out as he approached the village gate. The young man who had died was a widow's only son, and a large crowd from the village was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart overflowed with compassion. And then he said the most incredible thing, don't cry. Only Jesus, anyone else says that, it's inappropriate. That's just inappropriate. You don't walk up to a funeral procession and tell the mother who's widowed, after her only son has died, don't cry. You don't say it's wrong, right? Like he said, whoa, he shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't say that. Don't cry. Then he walked over to the coffin. Now it's just getting creepy, everybody. What's he doing now? He's walk over to the coffin. The pallbearers are carrying this young man to the graveyard. He walks over to the coffin and touches it, and the bearer stopped, the word says. The young man, he said, I tell you, get up. Then the dead boy sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. He just was like that, right? Like he just couldn't tolerate death. I said to you last week, I imagined this conversation he had with the Father, because the Father's like, hey, you can't resurrect everybody. You can't go around stopping every funeral. You can't resurrect everybody. That's not what you're here to do. You're here to work on an eternal resolution. There's too many people dying. You can't be everywhere yet, right? You can't resurrect everybody. Remember? Yet. But one day I'll let you. One day I'll let you break open every grave and everyone who's chosen to believe, even though he were dead. Yet shall he live. And then and what did the little boy say? I don't have time this morning for such pontifications, but I'm lost in the power of this story. What did he say? I just want to know. Everybody asks, he probably said, can I have something to eat? That's what everybody says. Like, why you got to be hungry when you get resurrected from the dead? But that's the general consensus of the people I've polled. And then he gave him back to his mother. That's what I wanted you to see. That dream that seemed like it was too dead, right? That hope of being healthy and whole that seemed like it was too far gone. Jesus brought it back to life and gave it back. He gave him back to his mother. She thought he was gone and gone forever, and Jesus brought the life back to life, and the restoration process handed him back. Ooh, who wants something back? Who wants something back this Easter morning? To believe that that thing that was God for you but seems gone for you can be restored to you. Happy Easter. Welcome to Resurrection Sunday. A takeaway to consider: if you feel like the unwanted bearers of brokenness are carrying you to the grave, I know a guy who can stop a funeral. You ever get those messages? People say, hey, do you know an electrician? Or I get those all the time. I don't know if it's just because I'm a pastor or whatever, but I get those texts. Hey, do you know someone? Sometimes I do. Yeah, I got a number for you. I know somebody. If the bearers of brokenness are hauling you to a grave, trying to put you under, I know somebody. I said, I know somebody. Hit me up about that. I got a reference for you. I know somebody that can stop a grave or a funeral. Stop the bearers from taking you to the grave. The first Easter weekend for Jesus started with the Passover, then when he got into the weekend, followed by Gethsemane. Oh, my gracious. Keep moving, Ron. I love the story of Gethsemane. I don't have time to stay there at all, but it was a point where Jesus did the big work of surrender. Not my will, but yours be done. That we can see how deep the emotion was in this moment. And then he was let off after his betrayal. He was arrested. There was a mock trial. He was mocked. He was made fun of, he was beaten, he was spit on, and ultimately he was led away to be crucified. And here's a point I want us to consider in regards to that. Jesus' relentless love and resolute determination to defeat death took him to the cross. That's what took him to the cross. He was determined. His relentless love and his resolute determination to defeat death took him to the cross. He didn't have to go. Everybody's yelling, if you're God, save yourself. You were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. You don't know what the temple is. I wish he would at least said something like that. I am the temple, you goofball. But he didn't. Just wait. The people who thought that probably didn't see. Some did. Some did. And then much happened at the crucifixion scene. Interestingly, and in line with prophecy from Isaiah 53:12, Jesus wasn't even the only person on this hill dying that day. On Golgotha, Matthew 27:28 tells us that he was hanged between two robbers. There was a thief on his right and a thief on his left. And what brought these two men to this place? Something else to wonder about. Like, how did they get there? I mean, we know Jesus was unjustly accused and traded for Barabbas, but what led them there? How did their lives end up at this place? Yeah, I mean, did you ever end up at a place and you're like, how did I get here? This is not where I'm meant to be. These guys are on a hill hanging. And I know this is a crazy thing to say, but they caught a break. Because if you're ever going to be put to death, it would be great if the Messiah was right there. Because you got another option, another opportunity. I mean, can you imagine? In some religious traditions, they would call them, the penitent and the impenitent thieves. And they have been assigned names based on history and those sorts of things. The Bible doesn't tell us who they were, but one certainly was repentant and one wasn't. What I know is what we witness in this moment is the most selfless act in history. Another point. Death brought this thief, the thief I'm about to share about, the repentant thief, to the place of dying. Love took him to a place in paradise. Because consider Luke 23:39. One of the criminals who was hanged railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong, he said. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And then Jesus said back to him, truly I say to you, today you'll be with me in paradise. Can you imagine? I think there's a little bit of a teaching point there that I hardly have time to make, but the one thief that was willing to own his own choices and realize that that's why he was where he was the one who was also able to ask God for forgiveness. There's something in there. There's something in there. And the one who was like, no, this ain't my fault, wasn't able to choose forgiveness and grace. I know this, though. In his most difficult moment, the Messiah was focused on saving others, not himself. And then in John 19, John tells us that after these events had completed themselves, Jesus said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It is finished. The Greek word for finished in this passage, it's really a word that often gets translated with multiple words, like it is finished. And it is also a term, though, interestingly enough, that's used in accounting in Greek culture. And in that case, it means paid in full. Paid in full. And if someone owed a debt they couldn't pay, they went to debtor's prison. That's what happened. You go to debtor's prison. If you had debts you couldn't pay, they would send you to prison. And that's certainly what happened in a spiritual sense here. If you couldn't pay, and none of us can, right? We know the reality. He paid a debt he did not owe. We owed a debt. Somebody help me a little bit. We could not pay. We were headed to debtor's prison, but then somebody stepped up to the pay point and said, for us. And the tense in this is powerful. It was past, present, and future tense. It is finished. paid. Not a little bit paid, not partially paid. Come on, somebody. But paid in full. Don't spend your life in debt to sin when Jesus paid the price to make you free. I feel like the Word's giving lots of advice today. It's not coming from me. That's coming from this passage. But don't spend your life in debt to sin. And the debt to sin isn't even just what we've done. It's sin's power over us. We talked about that last week. But Jesus didn't just come to pay sin's penalty. He came to break sin's power. And the power that sin has over us was broken. We don't have to be driven by desire, right? We can follow faithfully the plan of the Father. How and why? Because Jesus paid a debt he didn't owe. And behold, the Word says in Matthew 27:51, after Jesus had said, it is finished, the curtain of the temple was torn in two. And that's a part of the Easter resurrection story too. We like to see and talk about how that the veil was torn, and often when we see a pictorial of that or whatever, it's almost like a bed sheet, and it's torn. They reckon that the veil, as it were, was about 60 feet high and 4 inches thick. It was a significant piece of cloth. Nobody went in there and took, their pocket knife and cut it real quick. The veil separated we sons and daughters from the presence of the Father, and Jesus said, no more, no mas. Now you can come into the very throne room of grace, into the Holy of Holies. And the earth shook, and rocks were split. All this, it is finished, and boom, this scene plays out. The tombs were all opened. And this part, I mentioned it last week. And many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after the resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Because, like I said, the enemy thought he was putting death or life to death, but Jesus came to put death to death. And even as he died, others were resurrected because the real power of who Jesus is was coming into play. And then when the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquakes and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, truly, this was the Son of God. Even right then, man, the witnesses became aware. And then I imagine this. So maybe in that moment when Jesus said it is finished, maybe, the devil was hoping against hope, as I said last week, that sin was enough to keep him down, to keep him dead. Even though he had previously had the ability to resurrect other people, could he resurrect himself? Because what he had never lived under was the weight of sin. The Word says that he himself never sinned, but in this moment he took on all the sins of the entire world, again, past, present, and future. And under that, would that be enough to keep him down? Would that be enough to keep him dead? And maybe he was hoping against hope, but I gotta wonder, when Jesus said it is finished, what did they think? Maybe the devil was standing there next to one of his chief commanders, and he said, hey, what do you think he meant by that? It is finished part. Did he mean life is finished? I can't do it. Did he mean death is finished? Did he mean we're finished? What did he mean when he said it is finished? And maybe that captain was like, I don't know, but where did these dead people come from? Because I feel like this is a bad sign. Y'all with me? Are we together on it? Oh, my goodness. Well, the reality is they didn't have to wait long. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days. 3 days. And it was really more like, that was Friday night, so it was a short 3. Sunday morning, their answer's coming. The Word says, Luke 24:1, at the crack of dawn on Sunday, the women came to the tomb carrying burial spices they had prepared. They waited till the Sabbath was over and they could come. They found the entrance stone rolled back from the tomb. These ladies had some moxie because they walked right in. Ooh, hey, this is where we put him. And they walked in, but once inside, they couldn't find the body of Master Jesus, and they were puzzled. wondering what to make of this. Then out of nowhere, it seemed 2 men, light cascading over them, stood there. The women were awestruck and bowed down in worship, and the men said, why are you looking? So good. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? Do you ever want to say that to someone? Like they know you from your past. They know you when you lived hopelessly, or they saw what maybe someone else did to you, and they're like, they're expecting you to be so broken that you can't live whole. And they're keen to live that way with you. I ain't hating, but I'm just saying. Why are you looking for the living among the... Right? Because he's not here. This concept of how life should live or could live or would live, that's not what God wills and wants for you. Listen, you can be free. You can be whole. This is not where you look for that. Where you looking? Where you looking for life? Don't look for the living among the dead. I mean, find where God is and get there. You know what I'm saying? And he's easy to find too. When I was a kid, I know many of us didn't grow up in church, but I have some history with Sunday school, right? That was when we would come in as little kids, and it would be like before church. Adults went to Sunday school too, before, like main worship service. And they would teach us from a flannel board. Yeah, okay, so you had these little flannel graphs. We're trying to bring those back here at 828 Church. Those are cool. And the Easter scenes always, when the stone was like partially rolled away, from behind it was just an incredible light, unbelievable light that shone in that moment. And I don't know, I don't think that's inaccurate. I mean, these two dudes were just busting with white light, cascading over them. And I think in that moment, right, you go all the way back to John 1, right? And in him was life. And that life was light. And the light was the light of men. And the light shines in darkness. And the darkness didn't overcome it. Somebody say, thank you, Jesus. The darkness, are you with me this morning? The darkness, the efforts of the enemy to destroy you, to destroy me, to defeat us, did not overcome the light. We're not lightless and we're not lifeless if we choose Jesus. Do you hear me this morning? Because death doesn't win against God. Then back for just a close here to my mom's last days. I mentioned a minute ago, it was a couple years ago. And again, I've been with a lot of people in the last moments of earthly life. It's just different. It's hard. It was my mom. It was my mom. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've shed tears for lots of people, but it was different. My heart was really heavy, and it was hard. It was just hard. As life started to leave her, and she lost some of her other faculties and capacities those last couple of days, and she wasn't talking anymore, and it was like she wasn't really looking at you. But there were some interesting things, like if you touched her arm. I did that. I touched her arm, and she looked straight in my face and smiled at me. That was beautiful. And there was a song that she always used to sing. There's a city that looks o'er the valley of death. It's called the City of Gold. And its glory has never been told. How I long for the city where there never comes a night. And a beautiful city of gold. And we started singing it just over her, my sister and I, my brother. And her eyes came clear. And she started to sing too. Where the sun never sets, and the leaves never fade, and the righteous forever will shine like the stars in that beautiful city of gold. And I stepped back, and I thought, Death's not winning. What I'm watching right now, I'm not watching death win. Because it felt that way. Having to say bye, it felt like death was winning. And I stepped back and I realized death's not winning. Life is. Jesus is. Hey, say that to your situation sometime, would you? When the heaviness is all on top of your heart and it's difficult, push into Jesus and say, hey, just so you'll know, death's not winning. Life is. In fact, He already has. An Easter poem for today. Jesus said, it is finished. But what was He referring to? Was He saying life was over, or was He declaring that death was through? The totality of this fatality seemed to have won the day, but on every occasion death came calling, Jesus had the final say. 3 days. 3 days to wait for answers, 3 days to hope and pray. Then on the third day, as He had promised, Jesus rolled the stone away. Death's dominion, though impressive, was insufficient for the task. Jesus' power now revealed broke the power of its grasp. That first Easter sets the standard for how we too can come around. Even when we've lost our way in life, death can't hold us in the ground. Resurrection power, enough for every fight we face. Life to live in all its fullness because of His amazing grace. Life restored, death arrested, sin forgiven, Satan bested. Happy Resurrection Sunday. Jesus is alive.